This is one of those topics that no one really wants to think about, but if you're a parent, a homeowner, married, or helping take care of aging parents, it's something that honestly deserves a little attention. I'm talking about estate planning. And before you tune out thinking it's complicated or expensive, that's actually why I want to mention Trust and Will. Trust and Will makes estate planning feel way less intimidating than it sounds. They offer modern, attorney-designed wills and trusts that you can create online. And the process is surprisingly straightforward. In fact, you can create a will in as little as 30 minutes. That includes things like guardianship for your kids or pets, how your assets are distributed, and even healthcare directives. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your loved ones with Trust and Will, the most trusted name in online estate planning. Go to trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/future for 20% off. trustandwill.com/future.
Welcome to the Irish NFL Show, brought to you by QuinnBet and proudly part of the Believe Network. We're making our way around all 32 teams and assessing their needs ahead of the 2026 NFL Draft in Pittsburgh next month. Check out our draft previews for the NFC North and the AFC North wherever you get your podcasts. We're looking now at the AFC South. Brian O'Leary, Ciaran, Boyle and Shane Brennan with me, Conor Brophy. Let's start with bottom left guy with the reigning champions, the Jacksonville Jaguars. That reference won't make any sense unless you're watching us back on YouTube. But Ciaran, the Jags engineered a big trade in the first round last year with the Browns to move up and get Travis Hunter, which means they don't have a first round pick this year. What's the Jags need heading into this draft, you think?
Well, with the 56th pick, I mean that's a long time to wait to get some really top level college players. I mean, you got to look around the team and what they lost. They lost Devin Lloyd, that kind of mainstay of the linebacking crew. But probably the biggest one is losing Etienne at running back. It almost looks like they've got a running back by committee right now with Rodriguez, Bashal Tutin, and LaQuint Allen. So, and none of those three are really rolling off the tongue when you think of quality running back. So, with the 56th pick, I mean, that's running back territory right there. That's linebacker territory. So I would expect them to be going that kind of direction. But again, this is a team that, went from 4-13 to 13-4, defied all expectations. So they're going to, you hear that phrase, past performance is no indicator of future, future projections or whatever the complete phrase is. But that's kind of where the Jags are right now. They don't want to be the 2025 Washington Commanders. They want to have something to build on. There's been so many false dawns and false starts in Duval going back to Tom Coughlin in the 90s. They need something to build on. And, I think we can all agree that that was a really good first year for Cohen and Gladstone, Ladinsky and Campanelli in Duval. But again, what happened last year doesn't matter a thing this year. So to me, the biggest needs are running back. I look around this division in general, and we'll get into it in a little bit. Losing Travis Etienne, it was kind of on the cards. They weren't prepared to pay him. They let him go to the Saints. So it's no big surprise, but I have to think they're going to be looking for a running back or somebody back there, because that kind of running back of committee doesn't really excite a lot of Jaguars fans. And after free agency, have the Jaguars gotten better? No. But again, they didn't spend over for any of these free agents who are now, $10 to $15 million, a year more than there were 4 or 5 years ago. So they were kind of, economical with their money, and it looks like they're kind of, putting all the stock into some picks in the draft. They got 11 in total, including compensation picks. And you have to think that, they're going to build on this offense, which averaged nearly 28 points per game last season, ranked 6th, and a defense that allowed 19.8. So, everything's there to be built on in Jacksonville. It's just, now that free agency, it's not over, but it's, the buzz of it is over. And it looks like all the focus now is going to be on draft picks. So long story short, losing Devin Lloyd's a big hole. Losing Travis Etienne's a big hole. They've kind of solidified the O-line with, Cole Van Lanen, Ezra Cleveland, and Macari. So the positions of need, it's got to be running back for me, and definitely linebacker. Maybe throw in a D tackle as well, just to help out somewhat aging Armstead back there as well. So, but that's my opinion there.
Brian, they'd be looking under rocks and sending the lizards scurrying in Jacksonville, trying to find all those positions that Ciaran mentioned. One thing that I was interested in from Ciaran's interview with Jordan Reid at time of recording, and that was just this morning, Monday, ESPN draft analyst, and Jordan Reid said this draft is deep at receiver, and for a team that doesn't have a first round pick and that maybe does have needs in that wide receiver room, I can see the Jags dipping in there if this draft is as deep in the receiver class as Jordan Reid was suggesting it is, and he's not the only one suggesting that.
Yeah, I would go with that as well, Conor. I was actually doing my own little mock draft of the Jags because they got three picks in the third round, and we've seen wide receivers go off the board later rounds that have had stellar careers already. I'll show one out there. Ted Hurst, Georgia State. That's one that keeps popping up for the Jags, and the fact that they got three, it also allows them potentially to move around the board, Conor. But yeah, I think wide receiver is a sneaky one there. Second round pick. I thought we were done with the Jags because the way Ciaran started with the 56th pick in the draft, I thought he was giving us the selection already. But yeah, I think Kieran's kind of onto something there. I think
he's put that one up on Polymarket now. He's gonna put a new extension on the house when that one comes good for him.
I think that's second.
Except he wouldn't be doing it on Polymarket. He'd be making his bet with QuinnBet.
Can you get QuinnBet in the States? Find a way.
We'll have to find out.
IP addresses, VPNs. Conor, I think you're on the right thing. The fact that they got 3 round picks, and I know they're no fourth round pick, but those 3 picks in the third round are significant on the second night. I think it allows a bit of flexibility for them to take a best player available, or maybe move around the board to see if a wide receiver drops that they like, they move up and get him. But I certainly think wide receiver will be addressed. There's still a lot of speculation whether Brian Thomas Jr. will be there to start the season. I know the Jags media are kind of deflecting slightly on that, and so have the Jags officials, but there's no smoke without fire. He was nearly traded on the deadline last November. It's been continuously talked about. It strikes me as that kind of deal that if some team don't get a wide receiver that they're after in the draft, they might make a deal to get him in, and that will only be on the back of the Jags selecting wide receiver. So I think you're on something there, yeah.
Shane, we talk about a lot how you're building, first of all, to get out of your own division. And if I'm in the Jacksonville hot seat, I'm looking at that Texans defense and what they were able to do last year, and I'm looking at that Texans offense and what they weren't able to do last year. But I'm thinking that's a threat. I'm not sure where the Colts are going to be, but I'm thinking regardless, I want to make sure that Trevor Lawrence is properly protected.
Yeah, I agree. Look, there's a lot of areas, and Ciaran outlined there the fact that defense is probably a higher area for concern for Jacksonville. But if you actually look at the way that they're stocked up in the draft, plus the way they've been acting in free agency, they've a very, very quiet free agency. I mean, the sort of the free agency frenzy that we had a couple of weeks ago, we rarely mention the Jacksonville Jaguars. You look at the list of players they've brought in versus the departures, they have very, very few considerable or notable additions. And that's probably what builds up the need for them to try and be smart with the draft capital they have. I can see them trading up to try and get higher in the second round, maybe not necessarily a first round trade, but certainly get higher in the second round to either pick a decent offensive lineman or a wide receiver, as you were referring to earlier. Because look, like that Texas defense, and we'll talk about it a little later, but I mean, the way that it's schemed, the way that it's pressuring, and the Titans as well, who I'm anticipating will be stronger. We'll get on touch base on them later on as well. Like, it's going to be difficult. And look, when was Trevor Lawrence best last year? He wasn't necessarily given the proper run game to complement him at all times when he really, really needed it. He had improvements in wide receiver when he decided to make moves in the middle of the season, but he needed confidence, and in order to have confidence, you have to have the right coaching, you have to have the head coach to back you, but also you need to be able to stay upright. So I can definitely see the moving. That said, though, I definitely think that their first pick will be going in the linebacker room. I mean, just think of their defense and how much pressure that they will need to get on quarterbacks in their division. They led the NFL in terms of rush defense in 2025, but were one of the worst in terms of getting total sacks. And Josh Hines-Allen or Trevon Walker falls down during the season, which of course we see injuries in this league, especially for star defensive players. They're common. What's the backup plan? Is there a linebacker that can make plays? Are you going edge? So I definitely think that is where they're going to use the bulk of their draft capital. But further down the line, I could see them using a couple of those third round picks to maybe trade up, try to get higher, to try and get something on the offense, probably a wide receiver.
Before we go to Houston, Ciaran, you wanted to make one more point.
Yeah, just a quick one. I just thought as well, maybe tight end might be a move to make as well, because I mean, they made the upgrade from Evan Ingram, who's had his issues with drops in the past. Brenton Strange had a career year. 3 touchdowns, 540 yards. But when you look around the landscape of the NFL, you're looking for a a tight end who's probably producing about double that. I mean, you look at, tight end heavy teams like the Rams and the Seahawks, you're looking, maybe the Jags might be looking for somebody, in that regard. We talked about Kenyon Sadiq last week. Another guy to look out for is Eli Stowers from Vandy. I mean, he ran a 4.51, 6'4". He's not really a blocking tight end, more of a catching tight end. So that's another name just to look out for as well. Because, that Lawrence offense has got to be fueled constantly. I mean, it can't be one dimensional with just the running game and Lawrence running too. So look for another addition there maybe.
The Houston Texans, Brian, got to the wild card, won a game again, as they have done in each of the last 3 playoffs. We keep talking about them as the team of tomorrow. If they're going to be the team of tomorrow and make that today, they got to get those strong horses in the trenches, particularly on the O-line.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. I think it has to be offensive line. It feels like a bit of a patchwork situation. Like, to bring in White Teller from the Browns, who initially coming into free agency looked like one of the standout ones. It took him a while for the market to kind of evolve where he got picked up. Braden Smith's come in from the Colts, and it feels like they're kind of, not necessarily like a sticky tape, but it does feel like they're trying to find kind of experience.
I did find it interesting, not only the moves that they didn't make, but if you looked around the league at a couple of teams who you thought needed work on the O-line, Patriots, the Bears among them, apart from that massive move for Tyler Linderbaum, where did Tyler Linderbaum go in the end? He went to the Raiders, didn't he? Sorry, yeah. There wasn't a huge amount of O-line movement, and that's telling me that a lot of GMs reckon that there are good, healthy pickings to be had in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, Ciaran will know better, but I think there's like 2 suggested that could potentially even go in the top 10. It probably won't play out that way because of the nature of other positions and the fact that Ohio State have 4 players, legitimate players that will go even top 5. So maybe they'll drop down slightly, and they might not get down as far as the Texans, because obviously been a playoff team this year. They're picking further down the line, but like, there seems to be stacked in terms of second round, third round. But it kind of feels like every year right now they're trying to put an offensive line together to allow CJ Stroud to kind of play in the same manner which he did the first year. And it hasn't really worked, but it has to be addressed. It feels like he's continually chasing shadows out there, and maybe this is the year in which to do it. Defense for me, they are a very good defense. I think they could do a little bit bump up on their defensive line. Yeah, they've got some great edge rushers, but look a little slightly bit short defensive tackle. Some of them have moved off in free agency, so maybe that's another area of need. But it'd be interesting to see where they do go. Again, sometimes in these drafts, kind of, by the time you're getting to that selection because you've had a successful season, kind of all bets are off. They may need to go defense because ultimately the offensive line that they want is not on the board, and they'll probably sit tight and take them in a different round. I'd be interested to see what Ciaran's thoughts are on that one.
For all, and we'll get to that in a moment, but for all we've expressed frustration with the Texans, Shane, they remain one of the better set up rosters in the NFL on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, active in free agency as well in ways that I thought were very interesting. Bringing in Braden Smith into that offensive line at tackle, which of course is a big move. Dave Montgomery and Reed Blankenship also coming into the fold as well. Like, they've been active and they've been trying to find ways to, I guess, keep things fresh. Because look, everybody's sitting back here and almost assuming that their first round pick is going on offensive line because that's the obvious area of need. But I mean, their defense, if you're standing still in this league, you're moving backwards. I can see a reason why, particularly in the front line, where they might want to keep things fresh there. So I'm not entirely against the idea of them using somebody for a defensive tackle, especially when you think that they kind of need somebody to start beside Sheldon Rankins, and so to keep that pressure on, because that is their strength. Sometimes when you're in this league, if you see a strength, you can double down on that and try to build on that as your forward. Because look, let's be fair about this. There's been a lot of offensive linemen that's come into this Houston setup, and there's no guarantee that if they use their first round pick on one that they would fit in, because they keep trying to get so many different pieces and trying to move around this Rubik's Cube to get something that probably works with CJ Stroud. And maybe they might necessarily like one of these players that are going the first round and wait until the second or third to try and find that person and use that capital in D-line. I actually think that might be a smarter move for Houston here, because look, that offensive line, I don't even know whether it's a talent issue, whether it's just property coaching system, trying to make sure that everything fits, because they've tried so many different players, particularly the right-hand side, as is coming under a lot of pressure, as we saw in the playoffs and the tail end of last season. So it'll just be interesting to see what way they actually try to address that, because they've tried so many different paths to fix it, and nothing's worked. And sometimes just throwing first rounders at a problem doesn't necessarily fix it. The same way throwing money at a problem doesn't necessarily fix it. I don't really know what the silver bullet is when it comes to Houston's O-line. So they might end up using their first round on that sort of front up defensive player to try and keep that strength as strong as possible, which I think might be a smart thing to do, considering D'Amico Ryan's just so good at coaching those defensive players to put the pressure on. As we saw when, as I said earlier, they went through the New England Patriots offensive line like a train going through a cake. That's just how good they have been, and I'm sure that's how good they will be over the course of this season.
Shane, don't quote yourself with approval. Like one of us could have thrown that one out there for you. You could have even prompted us in the WhatsApp.
Because I know for a fact you've all forgotten it, because it's such a terrible analogy. That's why I'm bringing it back up.
No,
I want
brain in my brain.
I want you to visualize the steam engine going through that Black Forest Gâteau.
Actually, steam engine is even more evocative. That's I like that. Like that's actually upgraded the whole image now. I will embrace it from here on in. I'm sorry I ever doubted you, Ciaran. Speaking of doubt, though, the Texans, these are good problems to have. I mean, I have this team in a bucket alongside a couple of others that are maybe one good draft away from a Super Bowl if they play their cards right here.
Absolutely. And a couple of years ago, I was really, really high on the Texans, and they didn't quite live up to those standards. I mean, we can say what we want about Stroud and his postseason struggles. He just can't get past the division round, but that's another conversation for another day. Remember, this is the team that started off 0-3 and ended up 12-5. Just a great season. Very, very unlucky to go 0-3. Lost very close games at the start of the season. Once they found their feet, they were able to keep pace with the Jags all season, which is really, really good. I like the pickups in free agency. I think Nick Caserio, I mean, he must have heard from other people, and he must have got a little rattled about the kind of deficiencies that were highlighted coming up to the playoffs with the, I don't want to say young kids, but definitely rookies. Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, Woody Marks, not exposed, but out there too soon, too much too soon. And, it was a little bit too much when they played the Patriots in the playoffs. So he's definitely heard that. So you see him bringing in Braden Smith, the experienced tackle, bringing in David Montgomery. For me, it's definitely got to be O-line as well. One thing we haven't really touched it, but one thing maybe to bear in mind is the Texans have the 28th pick, but they also have 2 picks in the second round. So there might be some draft finagling around. They might be up for throwing a couple of draft picks in people's way to move up the board in the first round as a tackle. Because I think, notwithstanding getting Braden Smith, they're going to need some more help on the O-line. And at this stage, whatever help they can get on the O-line is going to be big help, because we all know that deficiency. The defense, we all know about the defense. We don't need to go into depth with that. One concern I do have with the roster currently is the running back room, kind of like the Jaguars. I know Montgomery, a down year for him in Detroit. Is he going to fire back, and is he going to be, extra motivated? But him and Woody Marks, I'm not sure how, that doesn't really. Woody Marks is a real small dude. I think he's about 5'8", and Montgomery's not that big either. So I'm just trying to conceptualize and see what that's going to look like as a 1-2 tandem right now. So maybe they're going to look into a running back.
Woody and Buzz weren't that big either, and what a duo they made. Maybe Woody and Montgomery is just as good.
See if he keeps his Knuckles name from Detroit. But yeah, I think O-line is definitely the move. And with the 28th pick, there's still some really good O-line prospects out there. They're going to need tackles. Caleb Lomu out of Utah, Blake Miller out of Clemson, 2 really big. I mean, these are 6'6", 6'7" dudes. And we're not going to go into their specifics and their mechanics, but those are some names to look out for in the latter parts of the first round. Running back, throw that position out there too. D tackle, I'll give you a name, Cade McDonald from Ohio State, another Ohio State guy. But for the Texans, it's got to be ramping up that offense. The good thing for them is that Nolan Higgins of a season under the belt. So does Woody Marks. So, you have the groundings of a decent offense. I think they're definitely going to be looking to add to some wide receivers in there as well. But it's got to be O-line for me. There's no other place to go in the first round for them. I mean, if they want to pick 2 or 3 other tackles and guards, that's probably the way to go too. But it's got to be O-line and go O-line heavy.
I like Woody Knuckles, though. Hold that thought. That sounds like a 1920s baseball player. He's a 47-year-old alcoholic, runs a 6-second 40-yard dash. Greatest athlete alive, they say.
This is one of those topics that no one really wants to think about, but if you're a parent, a homeowner, married, or helping take care of aging parents, it's something that honestly deserves a little attention. I'm talking about estate planning. And before you tune out thinking it's complicated or expensive, that's actually why I want to mention Trust and Will. Trust and Will makes estate planning feel way less intimidating than it sounds. They offer modern, attorney-designed wills and trusts that you can create online. And the process is surprisingly straightforward. In fact, you can create a will in as little as 30 minutes. That includes things like guardianship for your kids or pets, how your assets are distributed, and even healthcare directives. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your loved ones with Trust and Will, the most trusted name in online estate planning. Go to trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/future for 20% off. trustandwill.com/future.
From a team that we said might be one draft away from the Super Bowl to a team that pretty much thought they were right there last year, Brian, the Indianapolis Colts traded their first round pick for Sauce Gardner in the middle of last year. They went all in. I was saying at the time, I applaud the move because you got to make a decision at some point. Might have been a little bit premature for the Colts. They don't pick until number 47 this year. I think they're going to do.
I was thinking of that actually for enough this evening, Conor, when we were looking at the notes for this, the fact that you proclaimed it as a good move at the time for the Colts, the fact that it was such an open season, the AFC looked like it was there for them. But for me, at the time, it looked like they were already starting to slip off. I know they had that initial victory that weekend when he did play. Sauce Gardner played the game in Berlin, which Shane was at. He came through an overtime seesaw, ding-dong type of game with the Falcons, but it tailed off after that, and Daniel Jones was not playing very well. I think they need to give Daniel Jones another weapon, Conor, and the first-round pick is gone, but like as Ciaran's alluded to even in last week's coverage, there's numerous wide receivers in this draft. Pittman's been traded to the Steelers. Okay, so they brought back Pierce, but Downs hasn't really developed after his first year. I think they're a little bit light there. They got great play out at the tight end last year, and we've got a stellar running back in Jonathan Taylor. I just think now they look like they need another weapon for Daniel Jones. They've gone in on Daniel Jones again. This man is a master for getting paid, or his agent's a master for getting paid. But look, they've basically put all the eggs in one basket. They need to put players around. I think they're a little bit short if they're going to be challenging this division next year. They're also, linebacker seems to be another one this year for some reason. We spoke about it already on this show. We spoke about it last week. Linebacker seems to be a position of need for a lot of teams. They've traded away Franklin, their linebacker, to the Packers during that free agency scramble week. It was a trade deal as opposed to a free agency pickup, so it looks like a little bit light there. But for me, it's they need to give Daniel Jones another weapon. It's a wide receiver in the second round. And as Ciaran said last week, there seems to be plenty of them to go around.
A lot of teams, Ciaran, in the linebacker market, that seems to be the fashionable position in this year's draft. And, if the reports that we're getting are accurate, there are players there to be had.
Yeah, it is a really strong linebacker crew. Highlighted in the combine, I think there was, we saw Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles and all those guys. They'll be gone by the time the Colts pick. But again, there's depth in this position. They're picking at 47. David Bailey's going to be gone. Like I said, Reese and Styles are gone. A couple of names to look out for. Josiah Trotter. Remember Jeremiah Trotter? Well, his kid is out there playing football right now. 6'2" out of Missouri. Just a huge guy. 84 tackles last year. 2 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. Look out for him. He's definitely going to be around in the second round. And Jake Golday out of Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati. 6'4", 240. This guy, 105 tackles last year, just whizzing all around the field, just an absolute monster. 6 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. So these are guys that are a little bit further down the line, not as heralded as the top 4 or 5 dudes that we're seeing in the combine, and that are getting all the press on the network. But it's got to be. You lose Zaire Franklin, and you've already lost Braden Smith, but we touched on that already. But with Jones, that massive contract for Pierce, that, like, I agree with Brian. I think they're going to need more weapons too. We saw them come out like gangbusters last year, and it just went south real quick. They went 1-8 down the stretch, I was there in Jacksonville when they just capitulated. I know Jones went out injured, but there was nothing. It was a lifeless performance. There was nothing there. So I like O-line. Obviously, every team needs O-line. Every team is going to need edge, but wide receiver. We talked about it already. We heard from with Ciaran's chat with Jordan Reed, KC's Concepcion out of A&M. I've talked about Chris Brazell as well last week, 6'4" out of Tennessee.
Are you on commission for dropping KC Concepcion's name in every single draft preview? There seems to be a home everywhere for KC.
It's smooth. Oh, he's a dude. He's a real dude. Oh, he's a great player. Him and Brazell. See, the thing is right now with the draft with the wide receivers, there's a huge amount of dudes that are 5'11", 6 foot. Chris Brazell out of Tennessee, 6'4". You want them out jumping these 5'11" safeties and corners. And I think Brazell is going to have a real good market in the draft. Omar Cooper, if you remember him from the Indiana Penn State game when he jumped about 12 feet in the air and snagged that touchdown right at the end, he's going to be there probably in the second round too. So there's going to be some good picks out there for the Colts. Losing Pittman is a blow. Is Jones going to be healthy the whole season? That's the other question, but we're not going to know that right now. But linebacker, O-line, definitely wide receiver. Add in that Pittman loss. But it's 7 picks they have. They're going to have to really work and keep this kind of train on the track because they flattered to Steve last season. It ended really poorly. Well, let's see how Jones is when he comes back, and let's see how the rest of this team gels around him.
Shane, to Ciaran's point, for a team that were flying it at one point of last season, we are identifying, and a lot of areas have been identified now as areas of need, and they don't have a huge amount of draft picks to get it done here.
No, I think they only have 7 draft picks now after getting 2 compensatory picks. I mean, it's not a big haul they're coming in with here as well. And even in free agency, they had to put so much capital into the Daniel Jones contract that kind of ties them up in terms of what else they can do. I don't know where we've heard that story before, but it seems like that's just the way that this Jones contract is sort of put the way they can build his roster. And look, when I sit back here, and I think in the moment we always look back at this Sauce Gardner trade as being a sort of all in, put in all the chips moment to try and push for something. And when everything collapsed, now where are the pieces to pick it up? And they don't have the first round pick to try and get somewhere that they need to go. And it's funny enough, like most of the analysis coming in here about the Colts to sort of say, hey, they need an edge, linebacker, wide receiver to try and cover off some of the trades they've made. But I think offensive line is an area that they need work on. What was one of the biggest sort of comebacks that we saw? And I saw this in Berlin as well. The difference between how Jonathan Taylor plays in the first half of the season versus the second half, because that was just a big shift in terms of how the Colts played. It wasn't just Daniel Jones getting injured. Offensive line sort of got tired, got injured, and got worked out as well, because in the first half they were really good at sort of pushing forward and not only creating space but actually bringing the D-line back is sort of from contact, and that sort of degraded over the course of the season. I don't know where that comes back in unless you invest in and try to get a sort of a youthful, high level pick in the offensive line and try and rekindle that, because protecting Daniel Jones and giving Jonathan Taylor as much space to run as possible is the key to this team. Whatever, like they don't do anything on defense unless they keep that ball running, unless they keep the quarterback slinging it. And I know, yes, he probably needs a weapon to work with, but that's something that you could probably get and coach in the 4th round, or maybe even look elsewhere in free agency. I definitely think they should be looking higher up their draft capital. And again, they're not picking until the 50s in terms of getting offensive linemen. That said, Kyle Lewis from Pittsburgh as linebacker, this is a very deep linebacker class. It definitely seems like somebody who might fit into that system as well, especially after trading Zaire Franklin out the door. That's probably a key need here. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really struggling to try and figure out what these Colts are going forward. I don't know what the draft, even by the time he finishes, is going to tell me. I don't see them gung-ho to try and move up the order here to try and get a first round or an early second round pick, because they've already expended so much capital and they haven't got a huge amount of money to work with. And the free agency has left them with Pittman and Franklin and Braden Smith going out the door. It's a tricky transitional phase here. The coach is going to have to do a lot with those day 2, day 3 picks. They're going to really have to get their research done on that area, particularly when it comes to defensive players, because defensive talent, even if they're building a sort of no-name defense, they need to have consistency. They need to have somebody with a good injury record and try to build up solidity and strength there. But that said, as much as people are coming back here and saying that linebacker and D-end is where they should be using their second round pick, I think there's some wisdom in using and trying to get a good offensive lineman here, because that offense does not work unless Jonathan Taylor is given as much room as he possibly can get.
Brian, a quick point on Indy before we go to Nashville.
Yeah, it's just a linebacker episode, Conor, because it's interesting that Ciaran calls out Jake Galladay, because he's actually something that's been highly touted to the Jags in the linebacker position. And we're talking about two teams in the division that neither of them have their first round pick, but yet both of them are after linebackers. I wonder, are we looking at a situation where, next year we could be looking at, if only the Colts had got the linebacker in which the Jags got, or it goes the other way, are the Jags going to be looking at those three picks in the third round to get ahead of the Colts to get the linebacker ultimately that they want, knowing that the Colts, who are in the division, might even take that particular player?
To Nashville we go now, and the Tennessee Titans, who were bottom of the pile in the division yet again, Ciaran, last year. They got Cam Ward for their troubles, having been the worst team in the NFL the previous season. They picked 4 again this year, so they're in the top 5 again, which puts them in the market for pretty much anything that they want to do. And, that 4th overall pick is going to tell us something. It's going to set a tone here, because it's which poison they want to pick here. I can't remember who said it to us when we were at Radio Row, but great quote about, if you want to help your young quarterback, don't give him a weapon, give him a defense. They could take Arvell Reese, they could take Sonny Styles, they could have their pick of that top class edge rushing talent if they want, or they may decide to go for the sexy pick and take Jeremiah Love to give a running game to Cam Ward.
Well, speaking of Cam Ward, if we remember his infamous quote at week 5, let's keep it a buck right now. We ass. And that's what the Titans were last year. They were a whole steaming pile of ass. No two ways about it. 14. That was a real rough season for the Titans. Nice changes. Bringing in Dable and Robert Saleh. Borgonzi, 15 years with the Chiefs. He knows how to build a roster. So the only issue is it won't be this year. The only thing in their favor is I think they have up to, I think it's $90 million in cap space. Borgonzi is like Ted DiBiase right now, just waving the dollar bills around, because they've got a whole bunch of cash right now. But the problem is there's not going to be a huge amount of kind of progress made this year.
For younger listeners, Ted DiBiase was the $1 Million Man, if you want to check your wrestling history.
Yes. Here comes the money. Oh, that was Shane O'Mac. So yeah, free agent pickups. They got Wan'Dale Robinson, quite active in free agency. They got Bellinger. They got all those old Giants. What do they need in the draft? Like you said, defense would probably be the sensible pick. But for me, all signs are pointing towards Jeremiah Love. It's a couple of factors at play. You have a brand new stadium opening. The ownership wants asses in seats, and they want people spending money on $15 beers, and they want people bringing the family and the friends. So it's Jeremiah Love is a sexy pick. He's a phenomenal athlete. I can't see the Titans going anywhere but him at 4. Yes, Reese will be there, and Styles will be there, and Carnell Tate will be there, and a whole bunch of other people. But the running back market was rejuvenated when Saquon got that giant contract. It wasn't too long ago that people were saying the running back position is dead. I know that Genty didn't really light it up in Vegas, but he had no help around him. I think with the kind of additions that the Titans have made at O-line, and they're not done yet because they're definitely going to address it in the draft, but there's more around Cam Ward than there was this time last year, even a couple of months ago. I saw them against the Jags, and there was nothing out there. Cam Ward was injured in the first play. I think they brought Will Allen in. I can't remember if it was him, a quarterback, but DK, Ayomanor, it's not a star-studded roster, and they didn't put on a great performance. Jeffrey Simmons is probably their best-known player right now, but they did pick up some nice free agents. They need everything. The Titans need everything. You can't really pinpoint one thing that they need. They need help everywhere, probably excluding quarterback, but then again, I think they got, I can't remember who the backup was they picked up. But they can go in any direction. They could go Francis Mauigoa from Miami. They could go him at 4. They could go Tyson or Tate, a wide receiver. They could go Styles or Reese at 4. But I think I think the GM is pointing towards, let me get Jeremiah Love phenomenal athlete. He had nearly 1,400 rushing yards with Notre Dame last year, 3 receiving touchdowns, 280 receiving yards. So he's kind of that dual. You think of Saquon and how good his hands are, and in the receiving game, I'm not comparing Jeremiah Love with Saquon, but there's a lot of similarities there in his skill set. He had 200 carries last year. I mean, that's just an absolute workhorse, and you don't have to go far on YouTube to see the highlights from him. So, I've looked at it and I just really can't see. I mean, Love will be there at 4, and I just don't think the Titans can pass it up. I think it's too sweet a pick and too big a name to pass up in the draft.
Shane, this is a great market. It's a great fan base. It's one that's crying out for stars. To quote that beautiful, underrated movie Stardust, what the stars do, they shine. The Titans have the draft capital to get themselves a star here. Jeremiah Love would be pretty much one of the brightest shining from the college game.
Yeah, very much so. And that's the thing. I'm coming into this off season and trying to figure out what teams are in position to make a move based on where they were last season. I think the Tennessee Titans are in a pretty good position to move forward for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, you look at what they've done in free agency. They've decided to spend. They've brought in players that both Brian Daboll and Robert Saleh are used to working with. And some people are saying, well, is this basically, New York City posse coming down, a guy I never seen, to quote Wayne Jennings, down to Nashville, trying to rekindle things. But actually, you look at what they need in Tennessee right now. They need to work with people that you're used to working with, to try and build a culture, try and build a consistency, because one of the biggest problems I've had over the last 5 years is retention of talent, and it just ruins any form of consistency, of culture, of identity. Identity is, of course, a big thing that the Titans have built into now with the new crest, the new stadium coming down the line, the new jerseys. It's feeling very fresh right now in Tennessee, which I think is a good thing. And I think they're going to try and move that into the draft. We look at what Jeremiah Love offers, and Ciaran was given the Saquon Barkley comparisons. Look what Saquon Barkley was able to do, while Brian Daboll was able to run that offense in his first year in New York. That's a pretty good comparison to bring into a system, and a bit of star power as well that we need. I know people are looking and saying, well, what does Cam Ward need right now? Maybe he needs a defense. I trust Robert Saleh to be able to coach up some pretty good picks from the 3rd, 4th, 5th round in that defense to add into all of the free agency picks that they brought in there as well. Let the top talent from this draft go to that offense to try and build up. The template is already there. This is actually spelled out by a writer in the Nashville Tennessean. So credit to Nick Suss. This isn't necessarily my work, but he said that there is a template that of the last 8 teams who have picked a running back in the top 10 of the draft, 6 of them have gone for offensive linemen then as a rounder. Considering that how high they're picking the second round, 35 overall, going for Jeremiah Love as 4th overall, brings in the star power, brings in the rushing, brings in everything that Tennessee necessarily didn't have. Because look, Tony was able to get some pretty good runs at certain moments, but it wasn't consistent enough. Imagine what you can do with a young running back, a new face of the franchise. The franchise is moving forward with Cam Ward, with the regenerated offensive line, with a much better coaching staff in play. I think it's all there. Plus, you add that to improvements in the offensive line from the 2nd round and a 3rd round pick, then you start building up that defense. All the building blocks are there for by the end of this season. I'm not saying this is necessarily going to be a hot start, but by November, December, we can see a much better put together squad, a squad that's playing with purpose, a squad that's playing with unity, and that's familiar with each other, familiar with their scheme, and has a true Tennessee Titans identity to bring forward into the new era of the stadium. And I think Jeremiah Love is going to be a huge, huge part of that. Why not go for the sexy thing? Even whether you're trying to get bums and seats or you're just trying to win games, running backs are becoming incredibly important. We see elsewhere in this division what happens if you don't have a necessarily strong running game, or in Indianapolis' case, if you have a running game that completely explodes, it can bring you in a position where you genuinely believe you can win the Super Bowl. Why not learn from that, push forward, and pick Jeremiah Love? I think Jeremiah Love could be a real game changer in Tennessee. I know the Ashton Genty comparison probably doesn't fully tie up, because that Raiders team last year where they were in an awkward transition, didn't have the right head coach. The offensive line was so bad that Genty got tackled behind the line of scrimmage more than any other running back in the league. I don't see that happening this year with whoever's running back in Tennessee, and I think Jeremiah Love will be a great pick to go into that situation.
Brian, having talked up how it's quite likely that the Titans could go for the sexy pick, it remains to be seen what sort of influence Robert Saleh will have on how this draft unfolds, as a defensive-minded head coach, as a coach who did a magnificent job with the 49ers last year with like a whole bunch of players down as they were across the roster, but they were hit particularly bad on the defensive side. They could invest heavily on the defense and they could build from there, and that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing to do.
I agree with you, Conor, because I just think it's going to be one of those situations on draft night. Can he hold it together to allow the GM to select the running back when he sees these fantastic defensive players that are going to be available from him? It's going to be Bailey, Reese, Sonny Styles, and you can only imagine Robert Saleh would be loving the option to get his hands on one of those players and help him, build a culture defensively to bring this team back. Because even when the Titans were challenging a couple of years ago, even when Vrabel was there, a lot of it was down also to the fact that they had a really strong and stellar defense. Excuse me. It's a unique one as well, Conor. Like, you look at their draft board, they've got a selection in every round, and not many teams you can have an abundance of draft picks in various different rounds. They actually have consistency. Top end of each round, and then 2 picks in the 5th and 6th. So they've got an opportunity to put it back together defensively. This for me is where the draft starts. We know kind of give or take what's going to happen for 2nd and 3rd. 2 and 3, it's more a case of, is it Bailey, is it Reese? 4 is ultimately where everyone thinks is going to start, because the domino effect thereafter, they don't take Love. Do the Giants take him at 5? Is that even too rich for the New York Giants at 5? And we go from there. Commanders want Love. There's a lot of questions that are going to be asked, but for me, it starts at 4. I still think they may surprise and lean on the defense to get them back challenging and winning the division.
And you raised a point about them having quite a number. They've 9 draft picks overall. It's one of the great truisms of drafting, and I'm crediting Conor Orr for unearthing this one in looking at drafts over the last sort of 10, 15 years. And the teams that draft well draft often. They don't trade their picks. Like, you look at teams like the Packers, the Ravens, they invest their draft capital in actually making the picks themselves, not trading them, hoping that they can bring in a veteran or lure somebody who's going to perform now. They invest the resources because it's a volume game ultimately. Like, if a GM gets 2 out of every 5 draft picks to hit, they're doing well. The best way to make sure that you have a lot of good guys coming through the draft is to keep making your picks and keep to a consistent strategy. If the Titans can start doing that with this draft, that might set them on the right course.
Absolutely. Look, every year we see 2 or 3 teams that rebound very quickly who've been selecting in the top 5, top 10. If they hit on 3 of the 4 of those draft picks, and they're immediately impacting the team on the rookie contracts.
That's what the Seahawks did. You look back to that draft where they got Devin Witherspoon and Jackson Smith-Njigba, or the previous one where they hit on 3 or 4 defensive players. That was the bedrock for that Super Bowl winning team.
And Shane's alluded to the free agency cap space that's coming down the line again next year. So why can't they not quickly turn things around? It's going to be interesting to now see how Robert Saleh. This was the pressure in NFC may not be at the level in which it was when he was coach of the Jets, and he's also brought in some familiar faces who've also experienced different environments, who've been under pressure, i.e. Dable as well in New York. So maybe Tennessee suits their dynamic to go in there and turn this team around. I mean, what's the expectations for this team? 4 or 5 wins? 6, 7? Is it on offense they're getting them? Or so there? It didn't go there. I should have. My son would have been disappointed with me. 6 or 7 victories may be enough for this Titans team next year. It's going to be an interesting division come next season.
Well, every year there's at least one team that goes from worst to first. Why couldn't it be the Tennessee Titans? Check out our draft previews for all other 32 NFL teams wherever you get your podcasts.